What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 7. Sleepers and studs.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and my favorite stud at each position.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Oh, and good news, guys. Make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. Okay, guys, NFL Week 7. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. So my favorite stud on the slate at the quarterback position, it's Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Tennessee Titans, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. I'm sorry, they have the 7th worst defense overall. But Patrick Mahomes has averaged 28.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.3 rush attempts per game. And he's going to be about 12% owned, projected at 29.1 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's $8,400 DraftKings salary, $400 more on FanDuel, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 57 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 5. So you got a super high scoring game, a fantastic matchup, and a close competitive game, a game that could be within a touchdown throughout 4 quarters. So Patrick Mahomes, he scored 28, 22, and 33 fantasy points in his last 3 games. He's just in a great spot here this week. I think he's worth paying up for. So I like Patrick Mahomes here versus the Tennessee Titans. Okay, now a sleeper pick at the quarterback position is the quarterback on the other side of the ball, Ryan Tannehill from the Tennessee Titans playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Now, Ryan Tannehill, he's only averaged 17.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.2 rush attempts per game, and he's only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 20 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's $6,400 DraftKings salary, $1,200 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 57 points scored in this game, with the Titans trailing by 5. So the reason I like this pick is because we know it's going to be a super high scoring game. He's got a fantastic matchup. And with the Tennessee Titans trailing by a touchdown in this game, that's going to put the pressure on Ryan Tannehill to throw the ball, so he could get a ton of pass attempts in this game and rack up a ton of fantasy points. So I like Ryan Tannehill here versus the Kansas City Chiefs.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. My running back stud for Week 7 is Darrell Henderson Jr. from the LA Rams playing the Detroit Lions, who have the 6th worst defense overall. They give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing running backs, and Darrell Henderson Jr. has averaged 18.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 16.2 rush attempts per game and 3.2 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 79% of the snaps, which is super high for a running back, and he's going to be about 13% owned, projected at 18.1 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's 6,600 DraftKings salary, 1,400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Rams favored by 15.5. So you got a high-scoring game, a great matchup, and a running game script as the LA Rams should pull ahead in this game. They should end up running the ball a ton in the second quarter to run out the clock as they hold an advantage in this one. So Darrell Henderson Jr. got 21 rush attempts and 3 pass targets last week, scored 25 fantasy points. So I like Darrell Henderson Jr. here versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, my sleeper pick at the running back position is James Conner from the Arizona Cardinals playing the Houston Texans, who have the 8th worst defense overall. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Now, James Conner has averaged 10.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 13.2 rush attempts per game, and he's going to be about 6% owned, so a little bit higher ownership than I like in my sleeper picks, but 6% ownership is still pretty low, and he's projected at 11.9 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's only 5,600 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Cardinals favored by 17.5. So you got a great matchup, and this is a running game script. The Cardinals, they should pull ahead by 2 touchdowns and be able to run the ball. And James Conner got 16 rush attempts last game, 1 pass target. Now, he only turned that into 8 fantasy points, but the week before that, he got 10 rush attempts and 1 pass target. And the week before that, he got 18 rush attempts and 2 pass targets. Turned that into 21 fantasy points. So that's the game that I'm expecting here for James Conner. Around 20 touches and somewhere between 16 and 20 fantasy points. So that's pretty good production at only 5,600 DraftKings salary and 6% ownership. So I like James Conner here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. My wide receiver stud is DJ Moore from the Carolina Panthers playing the New York Giants, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. They give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and DJ Moore has averaged 19.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10.5 pass targets per game, and he seems to get about 1 rush attempt per game. So that rush attempt is pretty handy when it comes to fantasy points. If he runs the ball for 20 yards, it's 2 fantasy points there right off the bat, or right onto his score. So he's on the field for 85% of the snaps, and he's going to be about 15% owned, projected at 17.8 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's 7,100 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43 points scored in this game, with the Panthers favored by 2.5. So he's got a great matchup. It's going to be a close, competitive game, and I like this pick because DJ Moore is going to be matched up against James Bradbury, who's giving up 0.46 fantasy points per route. And you can find these the best wide receiver cornerback matchups right here in the article that we have linked from the news on our homepage. So this is super handy to see what wide receivers have the best cornerback matchups and what wide receivers have the worst cornerback matchups. So you're going to want to take a look at this list before playing your fantasy wide receivers. So I like DJ Moore here versus the New York Giants.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now my wide receiver sleeper pick is Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have a good defense overall, but they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Brandon Cooks has averaged 16.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.5 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 87% of the snaps. Now, he's only going to be about 5% owned, projected at 14.5 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary, 500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 47.5 points scored in this game, with the Houston Texans trailing by 17.5. So this is a good wide receiver matchup, and this is a passing game script. I could see Brandon Cooks getting 10 to 13 pass targets in this one. He did get 13 pass targets last game, scored 18 fantasy points. So I think that's the kind of game it's going to be here in Week 7, as they're going to be trailing probably the whole game, forced to pass the ball. So I like Brandon Cooks here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. My tight end stud is Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Darren Waller has averaged 14.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.8 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 89% of the snaps. He's going to be about 9% owned, and he's projected at 15.8 fantasy points here in Week 7. He's 6,700 DraftKings salary, 100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Raiders favored by 2.5. So he's got a pretty good tight end matchup here in a game that's going to be somewhat high scoring. And Darren Waller hasn't really done that well the last couple of weeks, only scoring 9 and 11 fantasy points off of 8 and 5 pass targets. So I think his ownership and his price have come down a little bit because of the lack of production the past couple of weeks. So I think this is the game to strike with Darren Waller. I like that low ownership, and I think that price tag is fantastic. This guy should get double-digit pass targets, and he's got 20-plus fantasy point upside. So I like Darren Waller here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, now my sleeper pick at the tight end position, this is a guy I've been picking for the past 3 weeks. I like Hunter Henry from the New England Patriots playing the New York Jets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Hunter Henry has averaged 10.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.7 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 71% of the snaps, only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 10.3 fantasy points here in Week 7, and he's only 4,100 DraftKings salary, 1,600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Patriots favored by 7. So pretty good tight end matchup here, and I just think he's had consistent production, scoring 11, 20, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks off of 2, 8, and 5 pass targets. So he was even able to get it done off of just 2 pass targets last game, scoring 11 fantasy points. So I think he can score 10 to 15 fantasy points in this one, and at 4,100 DraftKings salary and 3% ownership, I like those numbers. So I like Hunter Henry here versus the New York Jets.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.